After his strong performance in day one of the Pro Juniors, Hawaiian John Shamuka had no trouble sealing a place in the finals, as did Nick Wood of Merriwa, Marcus Brabant and Gary Taylor. Surffest coordinator Nat Jeffrey admits nobody really expected Jason Buttonshaw to miss out, but even more disappointing for locals, the disqualification of Luke Egan.
Our own Luke Egan was knocked out this afternoon due to an interference call, the same call that knocked out young Dave McCarthy yesterday. And also Jason Buttonshaw from the Gold Coast. Jason Buttonshaw was definitely expected to be in the final, but he has been eliminated this afternoon. Nicky Wood has made it to the final, and of course that final will be held next Saturday afternoon in conjunction with the City of Newcastle Longboard Classic final.
On the longboards, Nat Young and Stuart Entwistle, John Giles and of course Frank Gladder caused few surprises. Even now there's still plenty to see off the beach as top nationals and internationals prepare for more events tomorrow.
Surf has been excellent actually. I mean, the waves aren't what you'd call great quality, but for a contest they have been very good. They've been consistent. Swell stayed with us. The winds have been reasonable, a little bit strong in the afternoon, but as long as it's like this tomorrow we'll still be happy.
At 11 a.m. this morning, a man entered the National Australia Bank in Maitland Road, Mayfield. He approached a female teller and, after producing a small handgun, demanded money. The man then ran out of the bank with $5,000 and passed accountant Bill Knott, who was on his way back to his office.
I saw some money drop on the footpath, and it was at that point I just yelled out, "Hey, you've dropped some money." There was a customer in the bank that apparently saw him and started chasing him, and he came running past me at that point and yelled out, "Stop him, he's robbed the bank." And he kept running. I took a few steps to chase after, but then I saw the money blowing all over the road and started picking it up.
Police quickly converged on the area and began searching nearby parks. A customer chased the man but lost him near the Waratah railway station. Police began searching this area en masse. A short while later, a council employee drove across the oval and told police that he had found a gun in the toilets. The gun turned out to be the replica pistol used by the robber. Police were also carrying out a door-to-door search and found some of the man's clothes in a laneway near Hanbury Street, while others were located near Valencia Street. The man was last seen in a black and green striped T-shirt and black tracksuit bottoms. Police believe that it's likely to be the same person who held up the Advance Bank in Mayfield yesterday, but they say it's unlikely to be the same person who held up two banks in New Lambton on November 6. The man is described as 25 to 26 years of age, of slim build, about 175 centimetres tall, with brown collar-length hair.
All 23 country doctors from the Lower Hunter area have withdrawn their services. The decision is in line with a similar vote taken by doctors in the Upper Hunter. Last night's decision was actually a vote against a motion made earlier in the week to accept Health Minister Anderson's concessions. However, the doctors now believe that that offer left them no better off than they had been before the protests over income losses due to Medicare changes. Spokesman Dr Charles Horvath says this decision is a milestone in the ongoing dispute.
Well, it's highly significant. Out of the 250 to 260, maybe 265 doctors in New South Wales that have resigned, in this little crucible here, there is nearly 10% of the support. And of course, being a Labor stronghold, I think that's viewed very significantly.
Doctors have stressed that the walkout will affect elective cases rather than emergency cases. Even so, the decision is expected to place an enormous burden on larger hospitals at Newcastle, Wallsend and Belmont.
Now it's a wait for the response, and the timing of the response, the quality of the response, just has to be gauged as it comes. Mr Anderson just can't disregard the whole movement around the countryside.
Firefighters and members of the public gathered again last night to continue their call for a change of mind by Port Stephens Shire Council. The firefighters say they need a clerical assistant in their fire control centre to keep records and filing in order and, more importantly, keep the phones and radios manned. They say employment of a full-time assistant to handle the communication system takes the pressure off many others who do the job on a voluntary basis. And with 14 stations and 500 firefighters in the Shire, it's a big job. Up until now, they haven't taken a political stance, but this meeting at Tinilba Bay was different. This petition will be presented to the Council and to Emergency Services Minister George Paciullo. Protest organiser Don Rowland says Council will back down.
I definitely think that they will have to bow to pressure because the safety of their homes and their lives here are the big issue. If they turn around and reduce this service, we are worried that they're not only going to do this, council has, and this has come from a couple of councillors, stated that they are going to cut a few stations as well. So the public are not too happy about it because they're worried about their homes, their families and what have you.
Good afternoon, I'm Belinda Borissow. Disabled people across the world may soon benefit from improved mobility following the development of this vehicle here in the Hunter region. We'll bring you a report on that tonight.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Hello, I'm Jane Button. Tonight I'll be reporting on a tentative end to a dispute at Pelton and Ellalong collieries, which has left the mines idle for 4 weeks. The miners decided at a mass meeting today to return to work at 6 a.m.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Police say a man walked into this post office branch of the Commonwealth Bank at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. He produced a kitchen knife and demanded money. Newcastle detectives were told the man then fled on foot with a small quantity of cash.
Well, we'll have to get further details from the victim and also some witnesses here, and then hopefully we can get close to making an arrest.
Right, how's the victim?
Very upset by the ordeal, very much so.
Minutes later, police from 4 stations were scouring the surrounding neighbourhood. Acting on information, they then descended on a suburban home where they questioned 2 men. However, both were soon allowed to leave after assisting police with inquiries. Just as the operation was winding down, an armed hold-up patrol arrested another person at the Gunya Hotel. That man is still being questioned by police at Belmont Station. Detective Sergeant John Bacon says it's heartening to have such a rapid police response.
Oh, certainly. Yes, it most certainly is.
In this district?
Oh, well, I'd like to think so, yes.
It was a hard day's competition for surfers yesterday as the first batch of international seeds began challenging successful triallists for places in today's first heat of the BHP Steel International. The women's elimination heats are also decided, and today the top 8 meet the international seeds in the WDC Women's Classic. But on the eve of the main events, a chance for the 40 international men's seeds and 8 international women's seeds to unwind. Newcastle Council held a civic reception for the guests, and for outsiders it was something of a who's who in the world of surfing. Naturally, the occasion was somewhat subdued as the world's best pondered their chances in the coming heats. A few dared to partake of a couple of beers, but for most it was orange juice and an early night. It's serious business right now, but the end of the week and the end of Surffest will no doubt see some slightly less formal get-togethers.
Shadow Defence Minister Peter White and Federal Member for Lyne Bruce Cohen inspected the Williamtown RAAF base before meeting servicemen's wives. The two men saw the base's computer-based maintenance training system for FA-18s and the simulator room where the aircraft's electronic and cockpit systems are learnt. Mr White claims the Williamtown base faces dropping personnel numbers and attributes this to government neglect of service conditions. He says wives suffer along with their service husbands, and while housing isn't a serious problem at Williamtown, there is concern about government plans for the War Service Home Loan Scheme. The scheme currently enables service personnel to borrow up to $25,000 with low interest to buy a home. But in August, the government announced a proposal to change that and only provide a capital grant of $10,000.
Every time the government does something, it seems to take something away from them, and the best example is Defence Service housing loan fiasco we had 2 months ago, where the government tried to change the scheme and instead of upgrading the scheme, tried to take something away, and that's been going on and on. Pay conditions. There are 87 people in the whole 70,000 Defence Forces who get any education allowance for their children, so they can leave them at a school if they're forced. And there's this whole range of things, and it's the general feeling that no one cares about them. I've been very critical of the government for this. It's obsessed with equipment. But at the end of the day, you can have all the best planes, as they have here, the F-18s, magnificent planes. At the end of the day, if you don't have the men and women to man them, you really have nothing at all.
Members of the Bureau of Air Safety went to the scene of the crash today at Casillas near Merriwa. The $65,000 single-engine Beechcraft Bonanza was on a return business trip from Brisbane to Melbourne. The aircraft is owned by Melbourne-based company Medair, and according to co-director Vincent O'Donnell, it appears to have suffered engine failure while approaching a scheduled refuelling stop in Tamworth. He says the engine failure forced the landing, and in the dark, its pilot would have had difficulty locating the nearby Casillas airstrip. He believes the pilot made a decision to land the aircraft adjacent to the township to ensure the accident was noticed. He says the plane is seriously damaged, particularly on the left-hand side, where the pilot collided with a tree in an attempt to slow the aircraft down. Locals went to the rescue of the pilot, 25-year-old Mark Walsh, and his passenger, Medair co-director, 40-year-old John Flanagan, both of Melbourne. They are now in the Royal Newcastle Hospital. Mr Flanagan is described as in a satisfactory condition with a broken arm, while the pilot has head and serious back injuries.
Last Saturday night at the Motordrome, Stephen Davies showed just what 2 seasons' experience in the tough world of British Speedway can do for a rider. He literally blitzed the opposition. Tomorrow night, in the second test against the British Lions, Steve is part of a very experienced team led by Australia's top rider, Phil Crump. Today, Stephen and 2 of his teammates from Western Australia, Glyn Taylor and Glenn Doyle, were at the Motordrome to look for any advantage they could find in the track. All have ridden in England, where Stephen says the competition is intense.
You've got about 3 guys in each team, which are World Championship class, and it makes it harder for the fellas that are trying to break into it like me.
With Speedway bikes so similar in design and so even on power, winning is very much up to the rider, and flat out is the only way to go. What's the tactics for tomorrow night?
We'll just all get out there and do our best. That's all there is we can do.
The exhibition opened last night, and up for sale this year are 8,000 items of pottery, art and crafts. In the 3 hours of trading last night, $14,000 worth of goods were sold. Well-known Sydney and local potters and artists are featured, including Sue Steele, Cosette Leonard, Merrin Cork and Marie Kopaz. Neil Steen showed his style with the brush in person. Guest artist this year is Neil Savage of Salamander Bay. There are also displays of wood turning, lace making and cake decorating, to name a few. When the exhibition closes tomorrow afternoon, the Valentine Public School hopes to have made a $10,000 profit. Ironically, the church was formed on the site of an old racecourse on the 21st of November 1887. While the racecourse has long since disappeared, the church has weathered the test of time. Today a birthday party was held to celebrate the event, which included a display of historic photographs and other items from the church's past. Phyllis Griffiths has been going to the church since she was christened there 78 years ago. She was married there in 1934, while her parents were married at the church in 1908. A special combined church service with the Central Merriwa Uniting Church will be held tomorrow morning. The monorail proposal centres around the end of the railway line at Civic or Wickham stations instead of Newcastle station. The monorail would then transport people the rest of the way to central Newcastle. But Lord Mayor John McNaughton says a monorail is just one of a number of proposals to attract people back to the inner city.
Our Civic Development Committee looked at several things last year, and of the 5 priorities to revitalise the central business district, the third was the problem caused by the existing railway. And there are a number of options on that, and monorail's one, a light tram track's another, the rails as they are now opened up's another, and O-Bahn system's another. Take the rails away altogether and use buses as a transport corridor. They're all suggestions, and that's where we're at with all of them.
Proposals for monorails in Sydney, Brisbane and the Gold Coast have met with heated opposition, but the Lord Mayor says for Newcastle it's a good idea.
The monorails are a hot potato because you're threading them through buildings and past fine buildings, past roads, over certain historical things that people don't like the idea of being blotted out by a monorail. That's not the consideration in Newcastle. We have our transport corridor, and I've not heard any suggestion that that transport corridor be abandoned. It's just what sort of transport we put in it. And the monorail is completely valid.
The results of a traffic study for central Newcastle are expected shortly. They will be considered, and a decision on what will happen with inner city public transport is expected to be made within 12 months.
The annual general meeting of the Newcastle Youth Service heard that financially the centre is liquid but lean. However, the Reverend John Mason predicted a future of growing demands on the service with no guarantees of continuing government funding, which covers more than half their expenses. The answer, he says, is to adopt a higher public profile and hopefully generate more support. Director Ted Monahan says the public is reacting. Private funding has jumped from $8,000 to $22,000 in the past year. He says the service is in the black thanks to good management, but still has to meet growing demands from young people.
Something like the Newcastle Youth Service should be operating in a lot of local areas. We're covering the greater Newcastle area at the moment, and we can get call-outs as far away as Cessnock and Raymond Torres. Probably all of those areas should have programs like this.
So is it a growing need then? Do you feel it's a need that you're increasingly less able to meet?
Oh yeah, the sort of things that we're dealing with, the needs of kids going through the legal system, truanting at school, alcohol and drug abuse, family problems, kids leaving home, they're growing problems.
Guest speaker Merle Hercombe spent 30 years as director of the Sydney City Mission. She says government funding is being misdirected.
I think we've spent far too much money and far too much time and effort into providing refuges and places for kids to come outside of the family circle. We've spent all this time and money on counselling kids. We've treated parents and children as two different groups of people when in fact they're a unit and we should be working to get them together.
The spectacle of the world's best surfers out there on the waves is certainly an unforgettable one, but it's not easy to overlook the less attractive sight that greeted beach inspectors this morning. It's the other side of the glamour that surrounds Surffest, and one that City Council is no doubt becoming accustomed to. With crowds estimated to be well into the tens of thousands on the final day's events alone, it was inevitable that the beach would suffer. But the piles of rubbish, including a substantial quantity of broken glass, has the clean-up crews wondering whether the Do the Right Thing commercials have had any impact at all. It's thought the clean-up will take days, and without the use of heavy machinery, the task would be all but impossible.
This is all that remains of the white Ford Fairlane driven by a 20-year-old Seahampton woman who was 4.5 months pregnant. Police say the driver and her 7-year-old brother from Ellalong Vale were thrown from the vehicle after it slammed into a power pole. The impact ripped the car in two, killing instantly the family dog sitting on the back seat. Police say the driver lost control of the car, which was speeding, when it skidded in the gravel on the side of the road. The woman and child were rushed to Wallsend Hospital, suffering head and possible internal injuries and severe lacerations when they were thrown into the barbed wire fence. Traffic is still being diverted from the accident site.